Hi, third grade. We're ready to read the next two chapters in our book, BFG. Chapter 13, A Troggle Humper for a Flesh Lump Eater. That's a mouthful to say. Wonder what this chapter is going to be about. Dreams is full of mystery and magic. Do not try to understand them. Roald Dahl, the BFG. Our standards all lead to the last standard. RL 3.10, I can read and comprehend third grade literature. Now's a great time to go grab your notebook, and as I'm reading, answer the questions. Vocabulary words. We have foghorn, a device making a loud, deep sound. Sprawled, to sit, lie, or fall down in an awkward way. Infinite, limitless, or endless. Chapter 13. But I want you to make sure that you're answering the questions in complete sentences, please. I know some of you have been putting down one-word answers. So we still want to make sure that we are making sure capital letters and periods when we answer these questions. And even though you don't have the book right in front of you, you can go back and listen and then pause. And I'll kind of give you some clues when I'm reading too, that these are the question answers. What does the BFG do with the nightmare he caught in Dream Country? So apparently he catches, and what is he going to do with that nightmare that he caught? And then at the end of the chapter, the BFG smiled a big wide smile of absolute pleasure. What caused him to smile like this? And then why did Sophie and the BFG feel that the nightmare went to good use? Oh my, how can a nightmare go for good use? What evidence from the text describe a troggle humper? So I'll be sure to slow down and give you the signal. Really listen here so you can describe a troggle humper. What happened when the BFG blew the troggle humper? So apparently he's going to blow that. So what is going to happen? All right, we're ready. They is always having filthy winks before they go scumpering off to hunt human beings in the evening, the BFG said. He stopped for a few moments to let Sophie have a better look. Giants is only sleeping every then and now, he said. Not nearly as much as human beings. Human beings is crazy for sleeping. It's ever occurring to you that a human being who is 50 is spending about 20 years sleeping fast? I must admit that never occurred to me, Sophie said. Well, you should allow it to occur to you, the BFG said. Imagine it, please. This human being who says he's 50 has been asleep for 20 years and is not even knowing where he is, not even doing anything, not even thinking. It is a funny thought, Sophie said. Exactly, the BFG said. So what I is trying to explain to you that a human being who says he's 50 isn't really 50, he's only 30. Well, what about me? Sophie said. I'm 8. You is not 8 at all, the BFG said. Human being babies and little chidlers is spending half their time sleeping, so you's only 4. I'm 8, Sophie said. You may think you's 8, the BFG said, but you spent 4 years of your life with your little eyes open. You spent the other 4 sleeping. Titchy little snipper whippers like you not only be higgling around with an old sage of onions who is hundreds of years older than you. How much do giants sleep then? Sophie asked. They is never wasting much time snoogling, the BFG said. 2 or 3 hours is enough. When do you sleep? Sophie asked. Even less, said the BFG. I's a-sleeping only once in a blue moon. Sophie peeked out from her pocket, examined the 9 sleeping giants. They looked even more grotesque than when they were awake. Sprawled out across the yellow plain, they covered an area about the size of a football field. Most of them were laying with their backs and their enormous mouths wide open. They were snoring like foghorns. The noise was awful. So 2 of our vocabulary words. Suddenly, the BFG gave a jump in the air. "By gum frog," he said, "I's just having the most wopsy whifflin' idea." "What?" said Sophie. "Wait," he cried. "Hold your horse feathers. Keep your shirt on. Just you wait and see what I was gonna go bring about." He galloped off as fast as he could to his cave, with Sophie hanging on tight to the rim of his pocket. He rolled back the stone and he entered the cave. He was very excited. He was moving quickly. "You stay where you was, right in my pocket, Huggabee," he said. "We is a-doing a lovely bit of bushwalking both together." He laid aside the dream-catching net and hung on the suitcase. He ran into the other side of the cave and grabbed the long trumpet thing, the one thing he had been carrying when Sophie had first seen him in the village. The suitcase and the trumpet. With the suitcase in one hand and the trumpet in the other, he dashed out of the cave. What is he up to now? Sophie wondered. "Keep your head up good," the BFG said. "Then you will get a fine winkle of what's going on." When the BFG came near to the sleeping giants, he slowed his pace. He began moving softly. He crept on his toe toward the ugly brutes. They were still snoring loudly. They looked repulsive, filthy, diabolical. The BFG tiptoed around them. He went past the gizzard gulper, the blood bottler, the meat dripper, the child chewer. Then he stopped. He had reached the flesh lump eater. He pointed at him and then he looked down at Sophie and he gave her a wink. He knelt to the ground and very quietly he opened the suitcase. He took out one of the glass jars containing the terrible, nightmarish Truggle Humper. At that point, Sophie guessed what was going to happen next. Now remember, it asked you what is the difference between a Truggle Humper and maybe something else, or to describe it. So right here is where you really need to listen. "Ouch," she thought. "This could be rather dangerous." She crouched lower into his pocket so that only the top of her head and eyes were showing. She wanted to be ready to duck out of sight very fast should anything go wrong. They were about 10 feet away from the flesh lump eater's face. The snorting noise was very disgusting. And every now and again, a bubble of spit formed between his 2 open lips, and it would burst with a splash and covered his face with saliva. Ooh. Taking infinite care, another vocabulary word, the BFG unscrewed the top of the glass jar and tipped the squiggling, squirming, faintly scarlet Troggle Humper into the wide end of his long trumpet. He put the other end of the trumpet to his lips. He aimed the instrument directly at the flesh lump eater's face. He took a deep breath, puffed out his cheeks, and woof, he blew. Sophie saw a flash of pale red go darting toward the giant's face. For a split second, it hovered above his face. Then it was gone. It seemed to have been sucked up in the giant's nose, but it all happened so quickly, Sophie just couldn't be sure. "We had better be skittling away. Quick," he whispered. He trotted off for about 400 yards. Then he stopped. He crouched low to the earth. "Now," he said, "we is a-waiting for the gun and the flames to begin." They didn't have to wait long. So I'm going to read you the description of it. Squiggling, squirming, faintly scarlet, Troggle Humper, flash of pale red. The air was suddenly pierced by the most fearful roar Sophie had ever heard. Then she saw the flesh lumper eater's body, all 54 feet of it, rise up off the ground, then fall back down with a thump. Then it began to wiggle and twist and bounce in the most violent fashion. It was quite frightening to watch. "Ew!" roared the flesh lump eaters. "Ew!" "He's still asleep," the BFG whispered. "That terrible Troggle Humper nightmare is beginning to hit him." "Serves him right," Sophie said. She could feel no sympathy for the giant brute who ate children as though they were sugar lumps. "Save us!" screamed the flesh lump eater, thrashing about mightily. "He's after me! He's getting me!" The thrashing of his limbs and the waving of his arms became more violent by the second. It was an awesome thing to watch as he rolled around and began to twitch and have convulsions. "It's Jack," bellowed the flesh eater. Gruesome Jack, he's after me. He's whacking me. He's spit tickling me. Jack is splash plunking me. Oh, he's fighting me with this flesh whipping Jack. The flesh lumper was withering about all over the ground like some colossal tortured snake. "Oh, spare me, Jack," he yelled. "Oh, spare me. Don't hurt me, Jack." "Who's the Jack he's talking about?" she whispered. "Jack is the only human being all giants is frightened of," said the BFG. "They absolutely are terrified of Jack. They all was hearing that Jack was the most famous giant killer." "Save me," he screamed again. "Have mercy on this poor little giant. The beanstalk. Oh no, he's coming at me with this terrible spikety beanstalk. Take it away, Jack. I's a-begging you. I's a-praying you not touch me with your terrible beanstalk." "Us giants," the BFG whispered, "is not knowing very much about this dreadful human being they call Jack. We is only knowing he's a famous, famous giant killer, and that he's a most fearsome thing, and Jack is really good at killing giants." Sophie couldn't stop smiling. "What is you griggling about?" the BFG asked her, slightly nettled. "I'll tell you later," Sophie said. And then his arm hit one of the other giants that were laying next to him, and then so on and so forth. And before they knew it, all the giants were up, slugging and punching and hitting each other. So while they were sleeping, they kept hitting each other, and then they were waking each other up. Well, their noses went crunch. Teeth fell out like hailstones, and the giants roared and screamed, and for many minutes, this went on. The BFG smiled, a big, wide smile of absolute pleasure. "I is a-loving it when they're all having a good tough and rumble," he said. "Well, they'll kill each other," Sophie said. "Never," the BFG answered. "Those beasts is always walloping one another. Soon it will be getting dusky, and they'll be go galloping off to feed their tummies. They're coarse and foul and filthy," Sophie said. "I hate them." As the BFG headed back to the cave, he said, "We certainly was putting that nightmare to good use, though, wasn't we, Sophie?" And Sophie says, "Excellent use. Well done, you." So, to go and answer your questions, describing it, and what did he mean? It was put to good use, or what did Sophie say? Why was it put to good use? And they didn't waste that nightmare. Just why? So make sure you're answering in complete question or sentences when you answer those questions. Now's a good place to stop and go back, and then we will proceed to chapter 14. Here's your chapter 14 question. Vocabulary: dreams, convulsions, a sudden violent or irregular movement of a limp body caused by the muscles in your body. Solemnly, serious and dignified. Translucent, allowing light but not detailed images to pass through. Chapter 14. What does the BFG write on every jar, and why? Describe what Sophie saw inside of the jar. Draw a fizz wizard and draw a troggle humper. Now you just heard a description of the troggle humper. In the other chapter, Ms. Batone read, you heard about the fizz wizard. So you'll need to go and think about what that looks like, because on the bottom you're going to draw and compare them. This chapter is entitled Dreams, and there are many, many dreams in the book. And I've picked out a couple that I'm going to read to you, but hopefully you'll check out this book and you'll read, because there's probably 8 to 10 more dreams inside. So I'll let you know when we get to the dream part. The big friendly giant was seated at the great table in his cave like it was doing his homework. Sophie sat cross-legged at the tabletop nearby watching him. The glass jar containing the one and only good dream that they had caught that day stood between them. The BFG, with great care and patience, was printing something on a piece of paper with an enormous pencil. "What are you writing?" Sophie asked him. "Well, every dream is having a special label on the bottle," the BFG said. "How else could I be finding the one that I want in a hurry?" "You can really and truly tell what kind of dream it is simply by listening to it?" Sophie asked. "I can," the BFG said, not looking up. "But how?" "Well, it's by the way it hums and buzzes." "You less or more, right?" the BFG said. "Every dream in the world is making a different sort of buzzy hum music, and the grand swabog in the ears of mine is able to read the music." "By music, do you mean the tunes?" "I is not meaning the tunes." "Then what do you mean?" "Human beings is having their own music, right or left." Now remember, instead of saying right or wrong, he says right or left. "Right," said Sophie. "Human beings listen to lots of music. And sometimes the human beings is very overcome when they hear some wondrous music, right?" "Yes," she says. "So the music is saying something to them. It is sending a message. I do not think the human beings is knowing what that message is, but they are loving it just the same." "Well, that's about right," she says. "But because of these jump squiffling ears of mine," the BFG said, "I is not only able to hear the music, but I is understanding the music too." "What do you mean understanding it?" Sophie said. "I can read it," the BFG said. "It talks to me. It's like a language instead of language." "I find that just a little bit hard to believe," Sophie says. "I bet you is finding it hard to believe that you're here," he says, "and here you are." "Well, of course," she said. The BFG regarded her with those big, huge eyes. "I hope you will forgive me," he said, "if I tell you that human beings is thinking they is very, very clever, but they isn't. They are not. They is nearly all of them not muchers and squiggle pips." "I beg your pardon," Sophie said. "Well, the matter with human beings," he went on, "is that they absolutely refuse to believe in anything they cannot actually see right in front of their snozzles. Of course, the quagwinkles is existent. I'm meeting them often. I's even chittering to them." He turned around from Sophie to resume his writing. Sophie moved over to read what he had written. The letters were printed in big and bold, but they were not very well formed. And here is what it said. "This dream is about how I is saving my teacher from drowning. I is diving into the river from a high bridge, and I is dragging my teacher to the bank, and then I'm giving him the kiss of death." So he, instead of saying gave him a kiss of life, he said kiss of death. So on each of the jar labels, this is what he's printing. He's printing it so it looks like this, like all letters, and it's not very clear, but he's writing that's the label on the dream. "The kiss of what?" Sophie asked. The BFG stopped writing and raised his head slowly. His eyes rested on Sophie's face. "I is a-telling you once before," he said, "that I is never having a chance to go to school. I is full of mistake. It's not my fault. I do my best. You was a lovely little girl, but please remember, you is not exactly Miss Know Everything yourself." "I'm sorry," said Sophie. "It was very rude of me to keep correcting you." The BFG gazed at her for a long time. Then he bent his head to slow his breathing. "Tell me honestly," she said, "if you blew this dream into my bedroom when I was sleeping, would I really truly start dreaming about how I saved my teacher from drowning by diving off a bridge?" "More," the BFG said, "a lot more. But I could not be squibbling the whole dream on my titchy bit of paper. Of course there will be more to the dream." The BFG laid down his pencil and placed one massive ear close to the jar. For about 30 seconds, he listened intently. "Yes," he said, nodding great head. up and down. This dream is continuing very nicely. It has a very dorky, hunky ending. Well, how does it end? Sophie asked. Please, please tell me. Well, you would be dreaming, the BFG said, that in the morning, after you saved your teacher from the river, you'd go to school, and all 500 of your classmates would be assembled in the hall, and the teachers, well, all the head teacher would come up and have the children stand up and cheering, and you would want them all to wave to you, and they'd all say, because Sophie is so brave for saving the life of our fine teacher. That is really what would happen in the dream? Yes, said the BFG. Oh, I like that dream, Sophie said. Well, of course you would, he said. It's a fizz wizard. He licked the back of the label, then stuck it on the jar. I is usually writing a bit more, but you was a-watching me and you're making me jumpsy. Oh, I'll go sit somewhere else, Sophie said. Don't go, he said. Look at the jar carefully and think what you'll be seeing in this dream. Sophie peered inside the jar, and there, sure enough, now this is going to describe the fizz wizard that you're going to have to draw. A faint, translucent outline of something about the size of a hen's egg. There was a touch of color in it, a pale sea green, soft, shimmering, and very beautiful. There it lay, the small, oblong, sea green jellyfish thing that was at the bottom of the jar, quite peaceful, but pulsing gently, the whole middle of it moving in and out ever so slightly, as though it were breathing. Oh, it's alive, Sophie cried. Of course it's alive. Well, what do you feed it? Sophie asked. I don't feed it anything, the BFG told her. That's cruel, Sophie said. Everything alive needs food of some sort, even trees and plants. Wow. Dreams need nothing. They don't need anything to be fed. Well, can I see some of the other dreams? Sophie asked him. The BFG hesitated. Well, no one's ever been seeing all my dream jars before, but he picked her up off the table, stood her on the palm of one of his huge hands. He carried her over to the shelves. Over here are some of the good dreams, he said, the fizz wizards. Would you hold me closer so I can read the labels? My labels is the only telling bits of it. Remember, said the BFG, my dreams is usually much, much larger. And then Sophie begins to look at all of the dreams on, here is the label, and then there's another dream and another dream. These are all the dreams that are on the shelves in his cave. There's another whole page. And he begins to tell her there are dreams meant for girls and boys and certain situations. And he can hear what those dreams are. And then she looks up and she says, well, there's a shelf over there that they only have small labels on them. And he pretty much just tells her that he needed more time to write what those dreams were. And he didn't have time at that minute. So he just wrote a small little description of what is in the dream. And then the BFG crossed the cave and opened a tiny secret door in the wall. He took out a book, a very old, tattered book. By human standards, it was an ordinary sized book, but it looked like a postage stamp in his huge hands. One night, he said, I was blown a dream through a window, and I sees this book laying on the little boy's bedroom table, and I wanted it ever so badly. You understand? But I was refusing to steal it. I would never do that. So then how did you get it? Sophie asked. I borrowed it, the BFG said, smiling a little. Just for a short time, I borrowed it. How long have you had it? Sophie asked. Perhaps only about 80 years, the BFG said. Soon I'll be putting it back. And so that's how you taught yourself how to read and write? Sophie asked him. I is a reading it hundreds of times, the BFG said, and I is still reading it, and I'm teaching myself new words, and then I teach myself how to write them. Sophie took the book out of his hand. Nicholas Nickleby, she said. By Doll's Chickens, the BFG said. By who? Just then there came a tremendous noise of galloping feet from outside the cave. What's that? Sophie cried. Well, it was the giants, all 9 of them. Sophie peered out of her spy hole. She saw them coming toward the cave at a full gallop. "Where are you off to tonight?" shouted the BFG. "We is all flushblunkling going to England tonight." "England is a luscious land, and we fancy in a few of those little English chidlers." I shouted to Maid Masher, "I's a knowing where there's a giggle house for girls, and I'm guzzling myself up a whole bunch." "And I's a knowing where there's a boxel box for boys," shouted the lizard guppler, "and I's going to reach and grab myself a handful. English boys is tasting extra less squishly." In a few seconds, all 9 giants were out of sight. "What did it mean?" Sophie said, poking her head out. "What is a giggle house of girls?" "He is meaning a girls' school," the BFG said. "He will be eating them by the bundle." "Oh, no," she cried. "And the boys?" "Same for the boys." "There's nothing we can do." Isn't there anything we can do?" she asked. "Nope, there's nothing we can do," the BFG said. "We as helpless as horse feathers." He sat down on the large, craggy blue rock near the entrance of his cave. He took Sophie from the pocket and put her beside him on the rock. "It's now quite safe for you to come outside until they is coming back," he said. The sun now had dipped below the horizon, and it was getting dark. So they're off to eat, English children. So make sure today that you upload questions from chapter 13 and 14. Remember to answer in complete sentences and put your questions in your answers so that we know what you're referring to when you load them up for good practice. Oh, I can't wait for Ms. Batone to read the next 2 chapters.